Did you know that Adobe Photoshop is actually free to use under the name of Adobe Photoshop Express? Now, this is not absolutely the same as the actual full-scale Adobe Photoshop. However, if you're only concerned about global photo editing for your social media, Facebook, any kind of other platform, just to share in the web, if you want to create a cover for your YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, this is an excellent choice. Adobe Photoshop does not have a layer workflow. However, this is the same engine as Adobe Camera Raw. Let me show you how this works. So first of all, this is how the interface looks like in Adobe Photoshop Express. Now, obviously you can see that you have two ways to bring your photo in. If you have a photo inside your hard drive, you have it. If you have a camera connected, you can click the camera. Of course, the laptop camera is not exactly the same. And this Adobe Photoshop Express is made for 3 different platforms: laptop or computer, iOS and Android. I'm using the Windows version of Adobe Photoshop Express. Now we're going to bring in a photo, a proper raw file, and we're going to edit together, and I will explain you how the whole software works. Now I'm going to click Library, and once I'm done, I'm going to click Import, then go through my folder and then select one of the photo I have here. Now let me see which one I can bring in to demonstrate exactly how this works. I like this photo. Immediately, it doesn't take too long to bring it over. If it's a big raw file, obviously it will take some time. If it's not, then it should be fast. Now I have this beautiful photo of the gecko, which is kind of like a low-key raw file of Panasonic. Now at the top, because it's a free version, so obviously they're going to do some publicities here. Now you have the automatic version of it, which says auto enhance. I'm going to click it to show you exactly how it works. It doesn't do a very bad job. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit, see if there are any noise there. You can clearly see that there's a plenty of noise. So I'm going to bring it back and go backward to start from the scratch. Now on the left hand side, you have a button says looks. Essentially, it is exactly the same as your Instagram or photo editing app preset, or like a Lightroom preset. Now you have the basic, charm, black and white, portrait, nature, pop color, duotone. Now I'm going to demonstrate some of the example first of all. Now basic, you have the normal version, vibrant, which I don't really like because it need a lot of work with the exposure. Spring doesn't look bad. Invert, this is interesting. Remember, if you are actually doing some work with your negative, this is the way to go. And I actually quite like it. Maybe, who knows, I'm going to use this one to invert my film negatives. I'm really curious to see the result. Now, obviously, you have plenty more in this basic section. I'm going to close the basic. I'm curious about the charm. Now in normal, it brings back to the normal, then charm 1, charm 2, 3, 4, 5. I like it. This is quite punchy, vibrant. To be honest with you, this is just perfect. Just need a little bit of work on sharpness and contrast, but I think this is a good base because nothing is clipped. Now we have a slider here to minimize the effect or raise the effect. Obviously, you don't want that. Somewhere in between. Anyway, let's move on to following ones. So you can see, get the idea what charm does. This is one of those filmic look. To be honest with you, doesn't look very different than that, but pretty awesome. My personal favorite is black and white. Always have been black and white. So I'm going to bring back to normal. Then you have the faded black and white. Looks pretty awesome. Artistic, finer color. You have the 60s grab. Ooh, that looks good. And one of the examples that I personally like in this section, maybe antique. Yep, antique is essentially a sepia look, which is not bad. Green filter, for example. Essentially, imagine back in the day if you had the film camera and we used to put a green filter, yellow filter, or red filter on top of it to cut some of the color. So this is the green. Essentially, it affects on the green in the background. Now, portrait, not really the one that we're going to use here, but you also have the nature. I'm going to demonstrate maybe one or two example. This one looks good, pretty punchy and vibrant. Brew looks good too. Again, it's low key, so you need to work on the contrast and exposure. Pop color, I imagine that it pops the color to different tone. You have the blue, black and white as well. Anyway, you got the idea. Finally, you have the duotone, which is essentially put a color filter on top of it. So I'm gonna come back all the way. So yeah, answer is you basically have a look, a preset that you can apply on it, and then you can move down and then crop it. Now, here is the interesting part. This is probably one of the most important part of the software. Why? Because you can flip it back and forth like that. You can rotate it. Now, I'm gonna bring it back as much as I can. You can also straighten it if it's not straight enough. Now, the reason why I said that it is important as well, this section, is that look at the preset. So you have the free size. So you have the original. You can make it square. If you want to create a Facebook profile, you also have a Facebook profile preset. You have Facebook profile cover preset. Then you can bring it wherever you prefer. You have the Facebook page cover, Facebook ad, event cover, Instagram. Essentially, Instagram tend to be square, so you have the square version of it. Twitter header, Medium. Medium means medium format. So essentially, Medium back in the day used to be 4 and 6. You have the LinkedIn background. Again, you need to adjust where you want to put, of course. And Pinterest, YouTube thumbnail, which is pretty awesome. Etsy cover, if you have an Etsy account, you have it already. YouTube channel art, another pretty important tool, and Kindle for the ebook. And you have the other presets such as 4x6, 7x5, 5x6, etc., and so on. So this is why this is extraordinary. The reason why it's extraordinary because how much work it can save just to do a simple Facebook or Instagram crop. This is amazing. People kind of try to take it in not as important, but it is important. If you do a lot of cropping for your social media, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, third most important part, the correction. Now, I'm going to go back to my crop first because I think it cropped already. I don't want that. I'm going to go back to the free size, bring it back where it originally started, and then go to the correction. Now we have the original. So I can clearly see this is underexposed. I mean, of course, no highlight is cropped, but it is underexposed, isn't it? So we're going to fix it so they can demonstrate exactly how it works. Now we're going to start with exposure because obviously it needs some overexposed. So I'm going to pull it up just a bit without clipping the highlight. Now, second choice would be a contrast. Then again, I don't want to add too much contrast because it's quite contrasty enough. And highlight looks like nothing is clipping. So we're gonna reduce maybe a touch highlight. Then shadow, this is where it gets interesting. Maybe I'm gonna add a little bit shadow to bring some details. Maybe a little bit more. That looks pretty awesome. Now whites, personally speaking, I'm gonna just do a little test, see where it's going. It looks pretty good. I added a little bit of white and black. Maybe I can work with that, reduce the black a little bit, see where it's going. Actually, no, I'm going to go upward to 25. Now, we did our exposure correction here, or tonal correction in Photoshop. Now we are moving to the color. Temperature wise, or the white balance, this looks pretty good, but if I add a little bit more, it looks like a sunset. If I go backward, either it looks evening or early in the morning. So maybe I could stop somewhere here. Looks nice and warm. And tint department, I don't think there is anything wrong, but it looks a little red, so I can go to -4 to add some green. Remember, if you go backward, it gets greener. If you go upward, it becomes reddish. So you need to play the balance. So whatever it is, you have to counterbalance it. So if it's too red, you go backward. If it's too green, you go forward. Easy. Or again, you can actually purposefully add green or red if you pleasure. Vibrance, I think is vibrant already, but I don't mind adding about a 7 to 24. Let's say 24 looks good on vibrancy section. In the saturation, again, vibrance and saturation are not the same. Vibrance boosts the color. Saturation amplify the color. So what I mean, if you in vibrant, we were in 24. In saturation, you can add a little bit saturation to boost the color a little bit more. You don't essentially have to use both of them. You can use one or another. Works for everybody. Now, color is done. We are going to move on to effects. In effects, if you have a haze in the photo, you can use this slider to dehaze it, or add haze, or reduce haze. So I'm going to add haze because I like this atmospheric look, my personal favorite. And in fade, I don't want a faded look. I mean, it works for portrait, but for nature, I don't really prefer. Clarity, definitely, because it's wildlife photography, so I don't mind a little bit of clarity to add some micro contrast. Vignette, let's see how it works. If I go forward, it will add a white vignette. If you go backward, you will add dark vignette. Maybe I could add some vignette without losing details. Now midpoint, I want to go a little bit more. That looks good. So that I have the whole animal in front of me. Now detail section is also important, actually super important, because remember, if I zoom in, you have quite a bit of a color noise. So you're going to work on the noise here. How are we going to do that? Now, starting with, okay, we're going to go back to detail first. Now, starting with noise reduction, not sharpen. So color noise, see that color? So we're going to pull the slider slowly until this little bit of color disappears. Don't go crazy, be careful. So maybe go back. Can you see any color noise there? I see a little bit. So I'm going to go maybe 10, stop. 11, 12, stop. Looks good. The photo looks noise free now. Maybe luminance noise because you see a little bit of grain. So I'm going to maybe add about 5 luminance noise. Now because of the noise reduction, we have lost a lot of detail. It looks a little bit blurry. This is the side effect of any noise reduction in the world. In order to rectify that, we're going to go to the sharpen, slowly move it up to 25. See if there is any nice detail. Maybe you could use a little bit more sharpening. So I'm going to go a bit up. Start to look good. Maybe we can go to 70, 81 should look good. Now we're going to check before and after in a little bit. Give me a second. So we did our sharpening and noise reduction. I'm going to go backward. Looks pretty phenomenal, isn't it? I love it though. So detail section is done. Where are we going to go? Now we have few other choices. For instance, here we have split tone, which essentially means you can add different color in shadow, highlight, and midtone. Now actually shadow and highlight, and you can balance it. So I'm gonna play with it just for fun. So in the highlight, which is the brighter part of the image, I'm going to add a little bit of orange. It is already orangey, but I don't mind. And boost the orange part. So it became more orange now, isn't it? Now I'm gonna go to shadow and add teal. So I'm gonna go to the orange and teal section right there and see how it works. Look at that. Beautiful, isn't it? Now balance, what happens is that it actually push or pull whatever we did in shadow and highlight. So if I go all the way backward, it prioritizes the blue. If I go forward, it prioritizes the red. So I'm gonna bring it back in one. Finally, to finish, you have blur. So you can add blur, but thing is, you can clearly see that we don't essentially need to add blur here, right? The reason why, because it is already has a nice, beautiful bokeh. So, but just to demonstrate, I'm going to show you. We have a radial where you can add a round blur or a full blur. So you can completely make the photo blurry. We're not going to do that, but you know how it works. Now, we have done our necessary work and correction in correction department. The spot heal works if you have any kind of spot on your photograph. Lucky for us, we don't have it, which is magnificent. Then red eye, obviously, again, if you have any kind of red eye, it fixes it. Last but not the least, my personal favorite is border. So you have plenty of awesome border to add in your photograph. I'm going to stick with something film look, like edges. So we're going to go to the edges, click film, and look at that. Beautiful, isn't it? I like it. Now, I'm going to go back to the correction and add a bit more brightness, because I think this could use a little bit more exposure here. So I'm going to go to the exposure, add a little bit more exposure here. And because I overexposed it, this is a little too much, so I can go back. And I'm going to go to the highlight and reduce some highlight because of to counterbalance my exposure, so that I can bring back some details from the face of the gecko. Now this looks good. I'm going to let the laptop settle down, and voila. So you got the idea how the whole Photoshop Express works. Is essentially something that you probably have already used, but guess what? This time you're using the power of Adobe Camera Raw for free of cost and super fast, super quick. We're going to show before and after. So you have a button here to show you the original. So that's our original, and that's the final result. So here's the original, and here's the final result. Again, original, final result. Pretty cool, isn't it? And in order to save or share, you click this button on the top, and you can either click save, and it will directly save a beautiful JPEG wherever you prefer. I'm going to cancel it. To share, you have the share button, and if you have selected wherever you want, it will share the photo by email or save it in the nearby device with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Of course, you can also print. So yeah, how long it took? It didn't take that long, isn't it? It only took 15 minutes to do a proper photo editing in Adobe Photoshop Express. Beautiful, amazing, interesting. I love it. I highly recommend you to use it. It's so much awesome, especially for the fact that two things. One, the cropping department. You have all these presets, and you have this beautiful preset for free of cost and the correction is pretty awesome. You can clearly see the details from a raw file. Of course, it doesn't have histogram. Of course, it doesn't have the layer workflow, but for that, you have the other free stuff like GIMP, one of the best one that I personally prefer, or a little bit expensive Affinity Photo. But for free of cost, this is brilliant, and it can get your quick solution just with that. I hope this tutorial has been very useful to you. If so, like and subscribe. It helps me a lot, and I see you in future tutorial. Bye bye.